And with that, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. Dogs and cats, children and babies, boys and girls. I'm doing this all backwards today. It's the Driveline Academy podcast, world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. After last week's record-setting intro, this one is just not going to go as fast.
It's a slower post-Thanksgiving.
Yeah, everything's moving a little slow, moving into the holiday season. Yeah. In case anyone's forgotten, I might have forgotten, I'm Devin Morgan. I'm the director of baseball at Driveline. I am the founder of the Driveline Academy.
We are slow today.
Yeah, and I talk about youth baseball a lot. That's my brother, Jeremy Techteal, Driveline Academy assistant director, Driveline Academy International Man of Mystery, Driveline Academy Logistics Ninja, like all the things. Housekeeping, as per usual. Man, the pod numbers continue to pod. I think it's decently likely that we're going to hit triple digits by the end of this year, if not early January, which is just incredibly
Humbling. Yeah.
I think humbling is absolutely the right word for it. Man, thank you guys for listening. We say this on a decent basis, but it's just I'm never going to take for granted the fact that we get to do this and talk about youth baseball, and there are enough of you out there that want to listen, so I appreciate it, man. And if you're just tuning into us for the first time, if you can do the like, subscribe, share, notification thing, tell a friend, make your next move your best move. Driveline Academy podcast. Other housekeeping, we're moving into the holiday season. Axbat.com, code DL20, Django, Louisiana 20. Get yourself 20% off at axbat.com. They have a bunch of stuff marked down for the holidays. Presumably, if you're listening to the show, you like stick and ball sports. They have those things. They have game bats. They have training bats. They have wiffle ball bats. I'm going to use the code to buy myself the wiffle ball bat that they have. It looks pretty legit. So axbat.com, Django, Louisiana 20% off. And the only reason that it's Django, Louisiana is I finally got my wife to watch Django and Change.
I was going to say, you finally saw, you've seen this movie.
I'm on my probably fifth watch.
Okay.
You want to talk about a movie where the differentiating line between good guys and bad guys is very clearly set. It's such a great movie. I really, really enjoy that one. My God, is Jamie Foxx good in that?
Yeah, what isn't he good at?
Facts.
I've never seen Jamie Foxx in something and be like, yeah, he could have done better.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually saw on Instagram this weekend, somebody posted the clip from one of Jamie Foxx's stand-up specials. Okay. And he was talking about doing Any Given Sunday, directed by Oliver Stone.
Great movie.
And he was talking about dealing with LL Cool J, and he was like, LL just didn't. He thought it was a game.
Yeah.
He thought it was a real game. He's like, no, I'm Willie Beeman. Yeah. That's not my real name. Yeah. He was like, we're having an argument, but this argument is in the script.
Yeah. Didn't LL get into multiple fights on set?
Yeah. Shout out to LL Cool J, pioneer of.
There was I think The Ringer did an oral history of Any Given Sunday.
I gotta look that up.
A few years ago.
Yeah.
And it was, a lot of it was LL Cool J had no chill.
Yeah.
Was just going after people on the field.
It's great. And then famously, what was that movie he did? Deep Blue with the Sharks. Mm-hmm. And also did the soundtrack. It has one of my favorite lyrics in rap history where LL Cool J, who full-on anxiety would not show his head for the longest period of time. And his lyric in the song is... my head is like a shark's fin. It's maybe it is like a shark's fin. Dude, you've been wearing a hat for 30 years. We don't know what your skull looks like. Turns out his head just looks completely normal like everybody else's. Big shout outs to anybody post Thanksgiving season that's doing the holiday music thing. There are rules to this, though. If you're going to turn on some Christmas music, get that Mariah Carey, John Legend crap out of my face. I don't want to hear it.
This is our first fight on the podcast?
Dude, Nat King Cole, Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra. You want to get exotic with it?
Exotic or ancient?
No, that's my jam. I'm a full old school guy. All that Mariah Carey, the new stuff, I can't abide. I'm gonna send you a playlist.
Send me the playlist. That is that's a staple of Christmas. Mariah Carey is a staple of Christmas
All I Want
for
for Christmas.
Yes,
I know.
That's it. that you can't remove from Christmas. Like, that's the one that I'm not going to let you go after. Like, if you want to go after other new ones, like, totally fine. But, like, the Mariah Carey version is like, I can't.
If I remember correctly, my daughter was playing a game with my wife a couple years ago, and they tried to get through an entire like holiday season without hearing the Mariah Carey version.
Oh, it's impossible.
Yeah, and I think we all failed.
It's already played on our floor.
I know. So anybody that's doing the Nat King Cole, the Bing Crosby, you want to get exotic with it?
We're men of science. We could test this out with the kids.
Burl Ives.
How many of them have heard of Burl Ives? Or Bing Crosby.
Zero of them. And it's like, man, we were talking about this morning. Like, you wonder if Bing Crosby really realized that, like, because I'm a little older than you, I'm this much closer to death. For me, in my grandparents' household, like, Bing Crosby was like, that's what Christmas sounded like, right? Nat King Cole, that's what it sounded like. And, like, what my wife and I were talking about this morning is, like, do you think Bing Crosby really realized in the moment that he was, like, the voice of Christmas, you know? Because I don't think Mariah Carey thinks of herself that way. She just has, like, the one Christmas jam that's inescapable.
Yeah, his voice had a Christmassy tone to it.
Yeah, man, like, it just feels like when I turn on that music and I look outside and it's frosty, I'm like, yeah, no, this fits.
But if you turn on, like, regular Bing Crosby music without...
Oh, the non-Christmas stuff?
Like, the non-Christmas stuff, do you immediately feel transported to Christmas?
No, I feel like I'm in the 40s.
So here's where I tell you, like, that's just what it sounds like, even with the Christmas music.
Fair.
Like, it sounds like you're watching the audio version of It's a Wonderful Life.
And so that's where we actually
Which I imagine
landed.
people still watch.
Yeah.
Like, that's still a thing.
But, like, this is going to be a weird direction for the Youth Baseball Podcast to take. But
we're already down this road.
Yeah, you've gone with us on some tangents. I think that there's something about that version of Christmas, at like the 40s, 50s things, where it was a little less problematic to like celebrate Christmas Americana. I think that's what I'm like leaning into.
Yeah, I mean there isn't a whole lot of new Christmas music being made.
Yeah. But like, I mean, you know, Donny Hathaway did a Christmas song on an album that had nothing to do with Christmas. It was just like, Donnie's just going to, and like, that's Donny flipping Hathaway, man.
I think that was the plot of Pitch Perfect 2. Was Snoop Dogg it was like one of the side plots was like Snoop Dogg making a Christmas album.
That's a bad character side quest. God, Pitch Perfect. You want to talk about some variants? Django Unchained, Pitch Perfect.
Both phenomenal movies. Very different.
Very, very different. So we are on the cusp of having to get back to some youth baseball focused content. Last episode, we got like 45 minutes into it, and then our audio just died. So if you are a longtime listener who was like, oh, it's weird that Devin and Jeremy did like a really short episode, it kind of just ended abruptly.
Come on, you know us better than that.
That wasn't on purpose. So I think one of the things that we kind of started getting close to was actually some of the stuff that we ended up talking about a lot in the upcoming Skills at Scale Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual. So it's like, all right, why don't we just like do the whole thing? We've threatened it long enough. I'm going to have to find a way to drop some like chapter covers in here or there above me somewhere. Yeah, we'll do the thing somewhere. But I thought, you know, we could just like go through the content because there's a lot of it. And that, you know, I think one of the core things that I wanted to start with is like, it's not just a book. I think it has a lot of value as a book, obviously, because I'm the one that was dumb enough to write it. But the thing that kind of comes along with it is our yearly training plan, the individual, like, so the yearly training plan basically breaks down the different ways that we think about phases of training over the course of a year, where you go from a training phase into a competition phase, and then the details in the training phase of kind of what the focus specifically is. And then from that, you have individual workouts within. So kind of the idea is that the YTP, our yearly training plan, is like the big macro version. Yep. And then on a day-to-day basis, within that, you're executing the micro of that, right? Which is today on the throwing side is a hybrid B day. Well, what does that mean? Well, we're going to give you the prescriptive of sets and reps of everything that's going to contain with that. All the drills should have videos and linked down to it. The way that we shot the videos this time was, for anybody that's been around this thing for a while, if you look at the old Intro to Youth Arm Care, what you're probably seeing in there is a lot of like Matt Daniels videos of like Matty D ripping pivot pickoffs and wrist weights. And because Matt at that point was like in his early to mid 20s, they look pretty good. Yeah. But that's not necessarily what you're going to see when we work with a youth athlete. So what we actually did this time is I just tried to coach it live. And I did it with Danny. So obviously he's been doing this since before he turned 9. So he's got a fair amount of time under tension. But you'll still see within that, I think, some of the stuff that you would expect to see when you're teaching kids. So I just tried to coach it live and be like, hey, this is what we do. Here's what it looks like. Here's some of the stuff to look for. Here's some stuff to watch out for, right? Here's some primary coaching points. So it's got, to recap, the yearly training plan on the macro level, the micro level, all the actual like training plans within that, and the schedule that we would advocate that you kind of do that. Some stuff about team practices and some practice templates that I'm going to either do like a 4 to 6 week kind of like rec team practice is the way that I would do them. All the drill videos, and then all the actual written content, of which there are 14 chapters worth. So we can just kind of get into it. So the first chapter is basically kind of just like setting the table for what we do and why. Start with a quote with the great Carl Jung. If there's anything that we wish to change in the child, we should first examine it and see whether it is not something that could be better changed in ourselves. And I start the whole thing off just going like, look, I wasn't very good at baseball.
I was going to say, and we're off, right? The first youth baseball book to ever start with a Carl Jung quote.
And like, you know, it starts with this idea that like, look, I wasn't that good at baseball and neither were you. And I'm not going to be shy about the fact like I'm trying to be a little bit inflammatory, but what I'm actually trying to do is like set expectations. I think the tricky thing about club baseball and select baseball oftentimes is it feels like you're trying to promise something that's very, very hard to deliver, right? And I think that gets further complicated by the fact that my child, like a lot of other people's kids, are desperate to get the most that they can out of the game. But if you understand in really like raw terms how impossible that outcome is, if you are confronted with that, then you have to consider like, well, what are the other things I'm trying to get out of this? You know, one of the points that we make in the book is, so I was, again, very old. I was born in 77, right? So between 77 and 2004, which would be the birth year of an 18-year-old player taken in the 2022 draft, there have been 8,000 players that made it to the big leagues, okay? 8,000 players, it sounds like a lot. In that same period of time, there were 98.4 million people born in the United States and 3.7 billion in the entire world. So those drafted players represent let me get this right, 0.0002162 of all children born. And I know I throw around like this 1% of the 1% all the time. It's not even close to 1%. It's so far away from 1% by a factor of like 5. So, look, man, if I'm saying I'm not that good, I'm saying I wasn't good at baseball. What I'm saying is like you have to understand that there are just monsters out there. And the men who have gotten the opportunity to play professional baseball at the highest level of consequence and competition that's just such, I don't even know that outlier is the right word for that outcome. You know, it just seems so incredibly impossible. So I wanted to kind of confront that idea.
Instead of the 1% of the 1%, they're the outliers of the outliers.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So if you kind of work that backwards, if we understand how difficult and challenging it is for that outcome to actually be a thing, look, you know, I'm not trying to tell you that you can buy this book and for somewhere around $100, $150, I'm going to give you the secret sauce. That I'd be lying. I'd be lying, right? Nobody can do that. So if you understand that that's kind of a highly unlikely outcome, and I think the other thing is that it's an outcome that honestly should have more to do with your child's choices than yours. Mm-hmm. For me, I think there's an opportunity to shift perspective and say, okay, if I acknowledge that this is impossible, what am I trying to do for my kid?
Yeah.
I just want him to play for as long as possible. That's it.
And I think part of this, right, this is 14 chapters plus a lot of extra stuff to explain to you that secret sauce doesn't exist.
Yeah, you can't buy it.
It doesn't exist.
I think
if your kid isn't already an outlier of the outliers,
yep.
This is the only real path towards seeing how good your kid is.
Yeah, which is a different. I think it's a different posture about what we're trying to get out of the whole endeavor, right? And to me, I suppose I am guilty of seeing like parenting in a lot of this stuff. To me, it's just like, look, I want to give my kid the tools and the information in the system that is going to allow him to get the most out of this thing. How far he goes with that, it's not really under my control.
Nope.
Actually, and I actually had the first like acute experience of what that even looked like last week, because he had his first high school captain's practice, and I was talking to my wife about it. I was like, honestly, this is the first time ever that my son has played for a coach that I don't want to say handpick, but like had some amount of influence on, right? I coached him for as long as I could. His first select ball coach, who, before we had teams at Driveline, was a guy that I knew really well. And I could trust that I knew that he was going to do a great job of, like, the human being side of working with my kid, right? First year we had teams here. Chase Glom was here. Chase is great. We had a good collection of kids at that age. And it was like, boom, Chase has got to be the guy there. It's been great. You came on board and it was like, oh no, this is clearly the right guy to lead this group, right? And it wasn't necessarily, I think, a decision that I made. Like, you wanted to coach, but I was like, I'm still having some amount of, I don't know. I've got some amount of control to a degree.
Yeah, for sure.
And obviously, what does that say about me? Big control freak guy, right? And it was the first time, this last Wednesday. No.
But like, if I can throw in, like, the big control freak guy is, I don't want you guys to get the wrong impression, right? Like, he's a great parent. He sits in the stands. I
try.
He's a good parent. He sits in the stands. I do notice when he gets stressed and goes and takes a walk. But like, he doesn't try to control what happens.
No.
His control freak comes out in that, like, he wants to make sure that his son is in the right environment. And he's very freakish about that control.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same, like, I found out when I was much older that my parents would go to the school and handpick my teacher before the year every year.
Yeah.
And then there was this whole charade going down to the school for the first day of elementary school. Like, who's my teacher? My parents played along when they knew the whole time and I didn't know. But, like, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going in there saying, this is what you have to teach and this is how you have to teach it. But, like, I am going to get pretty picky about the environment my child is in and who's directing that environment. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call that, like, control freak.
Yeah.
I think when I hear that, I think, like, you're in my ear and, like, trying to coach the team, right?
No,
and that's, like, very much not the case.
No.
You've let all the control go, which isn't generally the case of a control freak.
Yeah.
But knowing that it's in the right environment, in the right hands, is what you do need to have the control over.
I appreciate you. Yeah, because ultimately, I think that big picture stuff matters more. It matters more. I mean, look, I think you're a great flipping coach. Does that mean that, like, and this is the thing, right? I don't know that great coaches, if I'm going to look at somebody, that's a great coach, I don't think it necessarily has to mean I unilaterally agree with every single decision that we're going to make, right? I don't think that's it. I think it has a lot more to do with how great are you at managing the experience and the relationships of the kids that you have. Yeah. And all that other stuff is secondary.
And they make fun of me, but I don't think they actually realize that I am just going to be, what is the meme from Narcos with the guy standing with his hands in his pockets by the swing set? Like, that's going to be me when they go play high school.
Yeah.
And I don't see these kids 3 times a week for the first time in 3 years.
Yeah.
I am not going to know what to do with myself. And they joke about it now, but I don't think they really realize the extent to which, like, No, that's like, yes, as massive as it is for you guys to play for the first different coach you have since you were 12 or younger.
Yeah.
That's a big adjustment for you guys. It's also a big adjustment for me, like, talk about control, like, letting them be coached by somebody else.
I know.
And, like, I know I'm going to show up to games because
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to show up to my kids' high school games.
Yeah.
And I am already, like, getting anxious about what that looks like of me sitting in the stands.
Yeah.
And watching them be coached by somebody else.
Yeah.
I'm going to want to say things.
Yeah. I know.
I'm fairly certain they're going to look towards like, I went to one game last year. That kid looked at me several times. Hit a double and pointed at me.
Yeah.
And, like, I am going to, like, I know they're going to do that. I know I'm going to have a hard time controlling myself, like, and just sitting in the stands quietly, like, and so I'm really, truly, I'm going to go through the parent experience.
Yeah.
Where, like, I'm going to have
100%.
I'm going to have these kids that I care a ton about, and I am not going to have the control over what that experience is like in that dugout. And it's going to be a very big learning experience for me to, like, have to, like, sit and go through that and watch them play high school.
Well, and it's, you know, the wild thing is that so one of the upperclassmen in the group for this captain's practice is a kid who I never coached him, but his dad, assistant coach for me for a while. Shout out to my brother Steve, and his son. I was just walking around the field, and he came out and shook my hand, and I was just like, man, it's so great. I think for my son to have an upperclassman like this, this is a kid that you can look up to, right? Because that's the thing is that, you know, yes, I've had a lot of influence on my kids' lives, I hope, over the course of this period of time, but we're moving into this next phase where peer group and the kids you're around are going to have a ton of influence too. And the other thing I said to him was like, so at our high school, the varsity coach has been coaching for, I think, close to 40 years. I mean, he's a lifer. And when I said to, you know, this upperclassman kid that knows me and knows Danny, I was like, I want that coach to stay around long enough so Danny gets a chance to play for him. Because that guy has so much baseball knowledge and experience. I might not necessarily agree with everything that he's done, but you can't change the fact that he has compounded interest so significantly over like 4 decades. I can't catch up, right? The guy's seen just so much baseball, and it's like, when you have an opportunity to be around those type of guys, man, I was just like, I just want to be around long enough to be able to have that experience. Yeah. So, you know, for the book, I think the thing that we try to set up in the first chapter is just very clearly like, okay, well, you're telling me, you know, this is very different than like the Ripken way. You know, like, hey, man, that I can't throw that name out. But what I can do is I can tell you, you know, we have a very specific objective, and we have a system that we're going to get it there. The system is this Driveline system. Since 2009, we're the best in the world at player development, full stop. And then specific to the objective is to create more competitive 90-foot baseball players. And that's it. There's a whole other world of stuff that, like, hey, look, if you're a 14-year-old who is coming into your first 90-foot season, yeah, I think there's a ton of value here for your coaches or your parents to start thinking about this stuff. Yep. I think that's probably also applicable to kids that are 16, 17, and 18 because, again, I know and you know the results that we've had with kids in our academy at those ages. Yeah. But a lot of this, you know, does kind of start with like, hey, you know, I think we talked about last week, what's the agreement? Well, the agreement is that 90-foot baseball is just different and it's important. And it's the thing that we all should be building towards. That's the intention of the book, is try to get there. Yeah. So that's kind of the first chapter as we kind of go down just like systemically, you know, what's going on. You know, I think, again, we talked last week about, you know, this issue with umpiring and how this downstream effect of not having multiple different age groups of kids that are coming behind this group of like 55 to 65-year-old umpires we have right now, how problematic that is.
And we talked about the Aspen numbers last week.
Yeah, so that's part of
Unless
it.
That got cut.
No, that lived.
Okay.
We got that far. We got that far, and then then the internet died. And then the second chapter is just, again, you know, kind of talking about, you know, the principles of the approach. And again, let's talk about the fact that we are talking about children, and there's a lot of specific stuff that you need to address and acknowledge when you're working with kids because they're just not small adults. Yeah. And
read the quote.
Oh yeah, we'll go. This is one.
There's a quote to start off each chapter.
Quote to start off each chapter. They're all a little bit crazy because I'm a little bit crazy. So the second chapter quote is old Stanley Kubrick, best director of all time. I'll fight you if you disagree. I mean, not really. We can have a conversation, but like I'm a big Kubrick guy. So Kubrick, at one point, I think in the series of interviews he was doing for Playboy magazine, because at the time Playboy magazine actually conducted like legit interviews.
Yeah, it was for the articles.
Yeah, it was for the articles. Yeah. I mean, like legitimately. Anyways, great.
You have to convince me.
Yeah. Me. Anyways, the quote goes, I think the big mistake in schools is trying to teach children anything and using fear as the basic motivation. Fear of getting failing grades, fear of not staying with your class, etc. Interest can produce learning on a scale compared to fear as a nuclear explosion to a firecracker.
I love that quote so much.
Yeah, which gets to, I think, the thing that we've been talking about constantly, which is this idea of engagement, right? That if you consider two different versions of a baseball player that's like 12 years old, right? And one of them who is just like terrified of failure because of the dressing down they're going to get in the dugout from the coach, the ride home that they're going to get from their parent, the regressive hitting lesson that might come after it, that fear is just not a great motivator. And again, I will accept that you could have an outlier like George Brett. George Brett spent basically his whole baseball life in fear of his father, and specifically in fear of his father's disapproval. And to the point that I think in one of, if you don't have it, Joe Pazansky has the Baseball 100 book. It's phenomenal. And Joe tells a story in the Baseball 100 book about
George Brett pooping his pants.
Oh, no, not that's that, a different one. Different story. About, I think he called his dad after he broke some type of record, and his dad was like lighting him up. He's like, "Well, you should have gone 2 for 3 tonight," and he went 1 for 3 or 1 for 4, whatever. I would offer that again, if we acknowledge that at the end of the day, your child's athletic life is going to be a very small portion of their entire life, then as a parent, There's a lot
of dudes out there without the talent of George Brett that no longer talk to their parents.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because of stuff like this.
Yeah.
Because of stuff like this. Because the relationship gets distorted and perverted because it all revolves around this fear consequence, which is very different than a healthy, sustainable relationship with your child that is going to carry until the point that you are in a hospital bed and they are holding your hand while you take your last breaths. Very different deal. So we talk about this fact that, kids are kids. You talk a lot about the cognitive differences, the biological differences. Your boy just bought another book about Jean Piaget, so I'm going further down this rabbit hole. If you were going to be surprised by that, we talk a lot about kind of the issues with coordination. Our sport relies so heavily on coordination, and as we all, I think, know outside of a baseball realm, kids aren't particularly good at coordination tasks.
Nope.
Or they could get good at them, and then they go through this phase of biological development where they get terrible at them, and then you kind of got to reset. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about, again, let's really dig into the weeds of what do good baseball skills mean. Well, it's a motor skill, it's a perceptual skill, and it's an accuracy skill. It requires all three of these things, and if you can understand that well and understand how to develop those things both in isolation and then in conjunction with each other, you're going to be able to create some better training environments that actually, I think are going to help you develop skills for your kids in a more sustainable fashion.
Yeah, no question.
And it's like I think about, the way that we run training on the floor, right? I mean, we're going to have days where the game is a bat speed day, right? Move fast, PR, hit the ball hard. And then we're going to have a day where they're like very game-focused objectives. Hey, we're stepping in a 2-2 count. Or however you want to construct it. But we want to kind of think about, if we understand the athlete and their needs and their desires and the stuff that's going to help them get better, then I think it puts us in a better position to start making training that's actually applicable to them, which is very different than, I think, a lot of other standard baseball training.
Yes.
Which just is not, it's tough. So we talk a little bit in here about, again, some of the retention issues to kind of substantiate this need for having competitive 90-foot baseball being a specific objective. if we know that that's true, then we have to kind of confront why that's true, which is we are hemorrhaging players at the same stage as we move into a bigger field. Well, why? Well, part of this is because you're just not ready.
Right.
It's hard to stay competitive in this game or want to continue to play it if you just are non-competitive. Which then leads us directly into
you don't want to do things you're bad at.
Yeah,
that's a human thing. It's not kids, it's not adults. Like, you don't do things actively that you really are bad at.
Yeah, and especially nowadays, man. Like,
there's a lot of ways to spend your time.
With all the ways these kids have to spend their time, like, why would you?
You can improve your Fortnite ranking.
Yeah.
That's what you can do tonight. Instead of coming to baseball practice and becoming a better athlete in 3 hours, you can improve your Fortnite rating.
And it's communicated to you transparently when you make that progress.
In Fortnite?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Which, again, if we understand that those kind of the game systems that these kids are in.
I don't know what they mean, but they tell me levels all the time.
Yeah.
They know numbers.
Yep. So if we understand that's kind of the way that they're accustomed to having their performance assessed outside of things, I think for us, and I know for you and I, it's just like, cool, we just have to weaponize this thing here in a way that resonates for them.
Yep.
So chapter 3 goes into, again, kind of like, all right, well, if we understand the player and we understand this desire and the intention, well, what's the solution? Well, the solution is a skills to scale thing that I was stupid enough to say in like 2018 and has since been kind of the way
it has scaled.
It has scaled. Weirdly enough. And again, I will tell you, kids' first captain's practice for high school ball, and it was just like, I'm sitting in the car, man, I'm just like this was the point.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted him to continue to love it as much as he did when he was tiny, when it didn't mean anything. And I wanted him to have a set of skills that like allowed him to at least a shot to continue to play. Yeah. And and past that point, man, a lot of it's going to be like more on him than it is on me.
Yeah, at this point, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going to read the Billy quote, the Billy Shakes quote?
There's part of me that wants to change this to go like / Jay-Z and put Jay's picture down there because he does reference it in a song. So this is, again, longtime listeners who remember when I was coaching 18U last summer and I had a fairly disastrous implementation of this same quote because 18-year-olds generally don't really know who Shakespeare is.
It went so far over their heads.
Yeah. So this is, it's Lord, we know what we are, but know not what we may be. You don't know how good you could be.
Yeah.
And again, this is Weathers 101. Hard work gives you honesty. The whole point of the system we're trying to roll out is to give kids the truth about how good they can possibly be. And that's, and again, just like this whole skills to scale concept, amusingly enough, like the first big picture on here is one of our smaller kids who, because of skill, Koba. Yeah, that's what I thought. Because of skill and because
he's beefy in that picture. I like it.
Because he's a dog, is an undersized kid that is going to be on our 15U team. And again, this is just one of the things we've gotten in this approach. Is he going to throw 100 someday? I don't know. Maybe not. But I feel really confident, and I feel good about the fact that for him as for his family, the system we've had him in for 3 years, I think is going to put him in a position where he should be a highly competitive high school baseball player. And
that, if we could take a tangent real quick about this kid, that's a kid that literally every baseball program in the country would take.
Yep.
And he loves seeing himself get better.
Yeah.
And that's like a huge sticking point for him of like why there's never even going to be a question of whether he's going to come back. Like he's just always going to be here because nobody else, like that is what drives him, is seeing the numbers and seeing him beat the numbers. And if it was just more of an abstract, like this is what we want you to do, he would not be nearly as motivated.
Yeah, and like, it's funny, the Fortnite thing, right? My son will tell me about kids who...
This one don't play video.
No, I know he doesn't. But my son will tell me about kids who... I don't think addiction is the wrong word in terms of the way that, like, the time that they put into video games to a point that, it detracts from other aspects of their life. The thing that I want you to understand with the skills to scale idea is that you can apply that same mechanism of like a gamified training environment that's going to quantify your improvement, and then you communicate that to the athlete, and now we're driving engagement and we are getting maybe some amount of addiction to this process of like literal improvement.
I would tell you that most of my 15-year-olds are addicted.
Yeah.
To improving, and that's like a really cool thing because like I do think addiction might be the right word to use for video games in a lot of these cases. Like I played a lot of video games growing up. I'm not gonna sit here and say that playing video games is really bad.
Me too.
But like there are definitely skills that it helps you adapt.
Yep.
There is a rate of diminishing returns where like then like you can get those skills playing an hour a day.
Yeah.
And doubling that doesn't give you more skills.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll never forget when I was doing the college athletic recruiting before I got to Driveline, and we started doing esports, and like the conversations I would have with parents, they're just like, "Wait a minute, you're telling me my son can get a scholarship for the amount of video games that he's played over the last few years?"
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, actually, like that is, and like if you have a kid who wants to go into like computer science or computer programming, like video games is not often a bad route if they play a lot of video games. Like I will make the argument that like for some of my kids, and again, the amount matters here, playing MLB The Show makes them a better baseball player.
Yes.
Makes them a smarter baseball player.
Yep.
Makes them a better baseball player. Now, I'm not saying go home and play it 4 hours a day. That's not going to make you a better baseball player. But like an hour a day, playing like one 9-inning game a day, is going to make them a better, smarter baseball player. And there are clear diminishing returns, but I'm definitely not anti-video game here. But there is an addiction level that I have seen with several of my 15-year-olds.
Yeah, and I don't know that that's a bad thing. I mean, I talk about this all the time, but I think that's this process of self-improvement. The Bible of Casey Weathers' approach to like self-improvement, I think, is something that plays all over the place. It's not just a baseball thing. So the skills to scale chapter, we talk a lot about kind of data use for gamification and engagement. We break down our skills to scale of hitting and throwing. It's real simple. On the big three of Driveline for hitting is going to be bat speed, contact quality, and swing decisions, right? On the youth side, we kind of distill that down a little bit to just kind of go that like, hey, bat speed and exit velocity are the things that we're going to focus on. And part of the thing about that is like, are swing decisions something that should be developed? Yes, absolutely. But we know that when we're working with youth kids, we gain a little bit by being a little simplified, like a little, sophisticated simplicity.
Well, one of the harder things about swing decisions is like we train bat to ball. It's bat speed, then bat to ball, and very little swing decisions because that is harder to really get positive outcomes from.
Yeah.
Because of umpires.
Yep.
Which isn't like a negative thing.
Especially at the youth
But
level.
like the lower you get, the worse the umpires are. So if you're training kids to swing at certain pitches or not swing at certain pitches, and they do the right thing and don't swing at certain pitches, and then they get rung up on that pitch, it's going to create negative momentum towards like not making those swing decisions. So like it's just not the most impactful thing we can train. So it's bat speed and bat to ball, and like the swing decisions will come as you get better and you face better competition, and like the competition you're facing knows where it's going more frequently.
Right. Same general idea what we do on the throwing side, where for professionals, collegiate players, et cetera, we're talking about velo, command, and stuff, right? What we're talking about on the youth side is just velocity and command or hitting a target, right?
Well, we've changed our third one on the youth side in a lot of cases here to, instead of being stuff where we're focused on that because velo is just going to improve your stuff.
Yeah.
Our third one is like health.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because like if your arm isn't healthy, it doesn't matter how hard you throw. It doesn't matter if you can throw strikes if you're not healthy enough to actually take the mound when it matters.
Yeah, so we get into that. You talk a lot about it. Again,
arm care.
Arm care and this idea of, thinking about the type of player you're trying to present to a high school baseball coach. Because when we present players that are just like very behind the output curve, that I've seen it more times than I can count. The difficulty of solving that problem versus a kid who has the output but needs to refine that set of skills.
Yep.
Right? Like, so let's talk a lot about kind of that idea and just breaking down the skills to scale concept, and then we get into chapter 4.
Yeah, that was all in the first 3 chapters.
Yeah, I mean, this might be a 2-hour pod. We'll compress a little bit. So
it'll get quicker as we go.
Yeah,
it's more broad. You're not going to go into each
No,
phase.
no. So chapter 4, again, we're getting into like youth training considerations. Again, one of my favorite quotes is by Harrington Emerson, who was like, I love that back in the day you could have like a guy that was like an efficiency consultation. Like that was a job. So the Emerson quote, as to methods there be million and then some, but principles are few. The man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods ignoring principles is sure to have trouble. So again, we're kind of coming into like, hey, we have to have some principles, right? If we really clearly understand, and I mean clearly understand the principles by which we're going to train these kids, I think we have a much better path to find the method that suits that principle, which is very different than like your average parent, coach, or kid who's just like innocently scrolling Instagram and is like, oh, that's a method. Oh, that's a method. Oh, that's a method. And you like...
Or this is the method that I was taught growing up.
Sure.
That I went through growing up. I think this might be like one of the larger problems.
Yes.
In baseball is that quote, right?
Because again, when you divorce these methods from principles, you're going to get pulled in all these different directions with no ability to figure out if they're actually making you better, which is a problem.
Yep.
So yeah, in this one again, we're really kind of confronting like, look, we need to understand the opportunity that we have in youth baseball if we agree that development should be a priority. And if we can agree on that, then I think we have, hey man, between the ages of 9 and 13, 9 and 14, you have a ton of opportunity to orient a kid and their experience in baseball around these type of principles. So talk a little bit about general adaptation syndrome and supercompensation. You have to rest to get these, to get these gains, right? You're going to get the adaptation only through rest. You have to be smart about these type of choices. And again, big Ted Williams guy. I've said this several times, but I'm not sure that like the Ted Williams path of going down to the ball field and taking like 400 swings a day until your hands bleed is really optimal.
No, I think he put out the book that I have, The Science of Hitting.
65, 68?
Somewhere in there.
Something like 67. Ugh.
Late 60s.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk about that.
Yeah.
He talks about, the swing and the bat path.
Yeah.
Not that, he is not acknowledging that I became a great hitter because I went and hit until my hands bled. I became a great hitter because this was my bat path and I was able to make a ton of contact because I frequently matched my attack angle with the descent angle.
Yeah, and hit balls hard on the pull side.
What a concept.
How dare you. So we get a little bit in the weeds of like what are effective environments that are going to kind of cultivate this super compensation thing we're looking for. What is this idea of like transfer of training, right? How do we know that the chips we're putting on this side of the table, almost dropped my laptop.
Cat-like reflexes.
Yeah, that's what that looked like. For anybody that's listening to the audio version, I executed a highly athletic movement to stop my laptop from falling. It wasn't like I just kind of stumbled into it. Talking into like the constraint-led approach, right? And this idea of self-organization. If anybody was around like on like the hitting Twitter days of like 2011, 2012.
God bless you.
First of all, God bless. You've hung out this long. Some of us should get like some PTSD counseling to talk us through these. There was this weird moment that like self-organization was just like, well, just like FIO, man, figure it out. There's a lot more nuance to it than that, and I think there's a way that you can implement that stuff effectively when you're training kids. But if you don't have kind of like the foundation of understanding the athlete and understanding the systems of training and understanding adaptation, you're going to be limited in how effective you can be there. Big Nikolai Bernstein guys, we get into like Bernstein's phases of movement. We get into, again, this cueing thing, right, of internal versus external cues, which is a big thing.
I think for me, that's the most important chapter.
Yeah, it's a big one.
From start to finish. Like, if you really want to learn how to be a better coach with youth athletes, that chapter's got everything you need, from, like, how to cue an athlete, how to properly cue an athlete, to, like, understanding that, like, rest is really important.
It's critical.
And, like, there's just way too many people out there that still don't understand the concept of rest and think that like if you don't kill yourself trying to get better every day, like you don't want it bad enough.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yes.
no, like, I know we've had the conversation with certain of the 15-year-olds. It's like, I know how bad you want this. And I know how if you go a day without doing anything, you feel like you're getting worse. But like actually that day is what's making you better. Like if you need to know I have to do something every day to further my goal of playing in college, it's okay for today's thing that you do to be rest, recover, and eat a lot of food. Like that is a good thing to do on that day.
I was just going to say that, like, I think that the problem is that they don't understand sometimes that nutrition and rest and recovery gives them the same leverage of the work that they did the day before. And it's like, no, you have to understand, man, that part is critical.
You could work twice as hard to get half the results, or you could work on periodization with rest periods in there, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk a little bit about, this idea of, I know that this is a weird way to phrase it, but arousal rate, meaning how attentive my brain is to the task that I'm performing, because I think that's a pretty critical thing that, when you put another 5-ounce, 9-inch baseball in a kid's hand, or you put the same bat that they've been swinging for several years, and it seems like they're like locked in this same movement pattern. Well, why? Right? Like why? Is that really a good thing? And different ways you can kind of weaponize that idea to help kids actually get more out of training. Chapter 5, again, leans into like the data-driven side of things, quote by old Sherlock Holmes, because, of course, I'm not above using a quote from a fictional character. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of the theories to suit facts.
It's like the old phrase, data doesn't lie, but people do.
Oh, boy.
So,
and really what we're talking about here, I think, is how to do this at an age-appropriate level. I think that's the most critical thing, because, you can be data-driven in a way, I think, where it actually, like, obscures your ability to see the stuff that matters most, right? And I think one of the ways that I did this poorly when I first started coaching was trying to use data. It was like literally trying to pay attention to too much stuff.
Yeah.
You're very much in the missing the forest for the trees territory, because you can't figure out how to focus on the stuff that actually gives you the most leverage and gives you the most signal. But again, of methods there are many, of principles there are few. Hence, why this stuff is all important to kind of lay this foundation.
Part 2 of this conversation coming next week.